Hey, I'm Pradeepa Ganhewa. I'm on staff with Rancho del Sol. That's Rancho Santa Fe, Del Mar, Solana Beach, and Carmel Valley. So we are here today to talk about committee and fundraising and RCE, which is just another Young Life acronym that we threw out that people are still trying to figure out. RCE is relationship centered engagement, and key emphasis on relationships. So we're going to talk today. I have one of my committee members, Matt Lewry, with me. I'll introduce him in a second. But talking about the whole concept of committee, because I think when we think about committee, so many people think, okay, this boring kind of check the box kind of engagement, and I think that what we've found in our area in Rancho del Sol has been, man, it's way more than that. And so when we think about committee and fundraising specifically in this COVID era that we find ourselves in, that's shifting, one of the things that I think about is a lot of people talk about First Corinthians 12, when they talk about, hey, there's one body, many members, everybody has their own set of giftings, and I actually like Paul's letter to the church in Rome. It's actually Romans 15:5. It says this: "May the God of endurance and encouragement grant you to live in such harmony with one another, in one accord, with Jesus Christ, that together you may with one voice glorify God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." And so I think that when I think about committee, I think about this: a choir, right? Everybody's singing the same song, but different people are singing different notes, and they're supporting in different ways. And there may be solos, and there may be duos and trios that kind of come in and out. And the reality of our committee is fundraising is a part of what a committee would do. And it's kind of inherent, it's there. Now, what we found is that the level that people engage in that fundraising, that's where the harmony comes in. And that's where we can make beautiful music to support really the heart of everything that we do in Young Life, is to be there for kids. Our mission as Young Life is to introduce adolescents to Jesus Christ and help them grow in their faith. And the committee is not removed from that mission. They are integrally glued to it. And so what we found is not everybody on committee has to be singing, the loudest notes of fundraising, but you do want to have a core group of people who are. And for us in Rancho del Sol, Matt Lewry is one of our committee members who really has the gift of asking and engaging, and he thinks creatively and strategically, keeps me and our staff on our toes in such a fun way. And really, he is a role model to other members on our committee because of his heart and his passion. And that's where the heart and your passion aligning on committee with your roles is so important. So I'm going to let Matt. I'm going to introduce Matt, and then I'm going to ask him a few questions and get his perspective. So Matt Lewry is a father of 3 daughters, and his wife Holly and Matt both serve on committee, and they are an amazing couple. So Matt Lewry, you can introduce yourself if you would.
Thanks, Pradeepa. So I've been on committee for several years now. My wife, I had not had any exposure to Young Life. My wife had as a teenager, and kind of duped me into coming to a committee meeting, and then I never left. So I'm glad I was duped, because it's an amazing mission and ministry. So happy to be here to answer some questions and talk a little bit about the kind of the giftings or the activities around developing support for Young Life.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So we're going to jump right in. I just have a few questions for Matt, and we're kind of going to dialogue back and forth. But the first question is, Matt, what is the role of committee with relationship-centered engagement?
So I think, relationship-centered engagement can sometimes sound like a buzzword, but really it's the core at what Young Life is. We are a relational ministry with children, with teenagers, with parents. And so expanding that to your mindset to the fact that whatever we do around raising financial support for the ministry has to be from a relational perspective. And so when you come onto committee, and I think we've done a much better job of this in recent years. When I came on board, I had no idea what the expectations were. And so as things unfolded, some of it was good surprises, some of it was bad surprises. And now I think when we bring people in, you're doing a much better job. And I think I would encourage everyone to explain the responsibilities of supporting this ministry with whatever giftings you have and whatever resources you have. It's part of being on committee. It's the responsibility. It's the joyful responsibility that you have. So when people come to committee, I think you can contribute knowledge, time, and other resources and gifts to the ministry. I think when you were talking specifically about support and funding, look, the fact is that this ministry doesn't exist without continuous financial support. And generally speaking, the more financial support that can be raised, the more children can be engaged and provided Christian mentors and hopefully find a path to Christ. So I think the critical part is having a core group of people on your committee that are at least not uncomfortable. Maybe they're not comfortable, but they're willing to make asks in a relational way of their network of friends and family to support a mission that they love. And I think that's when we talk about today, the rest of these conversations, where this all has to come from is if you love this mission, if you are 100% in on Young Life, then all of your asks, all of the things that come around money and support really just comes from that place of loving the ministry and being relational with people and saying, I know we have a relationship and would you be willing to support something I love?
And that's great. Absolutely. And I think that sounds, that's a really great concept, like in theory, but I think the next question that I want to ask is on behalf of committee and staff, because we have the same barrier, but, or similar barriers at times, but what are some of the barriers that, a committee member could face or have to overcome in order to get to that place where they're, relying and connecting with their personal or their professional networks to help support the ministry financially?
Yeah. So again, starting out, I think, remember, we're talking about a group of people who in your committee who are willing to do this and maybe they have giftings towards this. We have people on our committee who aren't gifted in this area, and you don't want to force those people into this role. You can't have everybody who doesn't want to do it because your area will fail. So I would say that, first of all, the first thing is no one likes to ask for money, period. Unless you're a sales guy or a gal or, that's your profession and you're used to asking for the deal and whatever, that's kind of a natural transition. But most people don't like asking for money or beginning the conversation. So I think there's tools that we could share from our area. There's other things, but beginning the conversation should always start with the Young Life ministry and your love for the ministry and why it matters to you. If you start there and you're authentic about that, then, building to the point where you can ask. Sometimes you don't even have to ask because someone says, oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. How can I help you? But you have to start there and build towards that. I think that a fear of someone not having the same belief as you. Again, remember, we're talking about relationships you already have. So some of those relationships, they're Christian. Some of them may not be believers, but they have a bond with you in some way. You're not cold calling people and asking them to help you. So remember that at the bottom line is, you're going to ask someone you have a relationship with and be confident that that relationship is strong enough to withstand the ask. Some people's reactions are, well, tell me a lot more about it. I don't invest in things that I don't understand or know. So here's my pitch, my thing on that is have an elevator pitch that is authentic. And the elevator pitch, I mean, why does this ministry important to you? What does it do? And it can be layman's terms. You don't have to have I can't even today give a full explanation of everything Young Life does, but I know what it does in our area and I know the impact it has on kids. So be prepared with that. That's something that you can write down ahead of time. And just so when you're nervous and somebody asks you that, you can just say from the heart, this is what this ministry does. And then obviously the last one is just the fear of unknown. What's going to happen after I ask? Am I going to destroy my relationship? Am I going to, and I think what you have to do is come from that place again and asking God for support through this ask, and just, being open-hearted and saying, if you can help me, that would be amazing. And if you can't, that's okay too.
Man, that's great. Yeah. I think, we talked about, Matt, it was great. You're identifying some of the obstacles that we've experienced and just in general that I think is part of human nature, but also in thinking about how to start resourcing some of those fears into opportunities. Thanks for doing that. I think one of the things that I've seen in my very short time here in Rancho del Sol is Matt and a handful of our other committee members. They've just set an amazing and exciting example, so that there were people that when I first came on said, "Hey, I'm not a good asker. I'm not going to ask that much." But by the end of our time and some of our events, which I'll share with you a few of them at the end, they were making significant asks of their family members and of their friends, and that kind of continued on throughout the year. So I think there is this sense of like, man, if there are this core group of people, they can inspire, but they can also like help support and lift up, the people who are not as comfortable. So I think one of the things that I always think about is, hey, how do we overcome some of those things? So Matt, would you just share a little bit more about maybe overcoming some of those fears? I think you shared a little bit about it, but
yeah, there's just some specific, kind of tactical things to kind of help committee members through. First one is pray. So a lot of it is praying about who you could ask God to put people in front of you, friends, relatives, ideas. Just, be creative and ask God for that direction. It's super helpful. A lot of people just put the backpack on and go, we're going to go do this. Let's go take the hill, and forget that, we're doing this to glorify God. So asking God for help and direction is really, really important. And then know your why. That's what I was talking about with the elevator pitch. I mean, like, why do you have the boldness to ask? If you know that and you're really confident in that, then you're going to come off as authentic and loving and well-intended. And I think that specific thing of just stopping and knowing your why, and sometimes you get into your habit. I've been in committee for 7 years, so I just do this. Just know the why and be close to that why, and then you'll come off as authentic. The other thing is finding people in your committee that are strong at this, and asking them for ideas and support and camaraderie. We've tried different things in our area. One of the things we borrowed from another area is this Best Friends campaign, and we tried it a couple years, and it didn't really work that well. It worked okay, but then we modified it for our area. What works for our area? And one thing that worked really well is we gamified it. We made it. We broke up into teams, and we, would text each other complimentary, like, hey, our team just got this. And then the other team would say, oh, that's great, but we got to get going. And it was just kind of fun ways. And you have to experiment and see how it's going to work. Right. And then, understanding again, kind of the end of the day, what is the bottom line? Why are we doing this? And I think it's as simple as saying, without financial resources, there is no ministry. And the more financial resources we raise, the more kids we can impact. And that is super, super simple to understand.
Man, fantastic. Now you guys see why I invited Matt Lewry on this call, because he's awesome. So last question for you, and then we'll transition into our virtual banquet, our area's virtual banquet, and some of the things that we found successful. But how does committee and the area stay engaged throughout the year with donors?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting area that is critical to the long-term success of this, and frankly, making it easier and easier every year to ask your relationships. So what we found is that when you start, you might, be uncomfortable. So your first year of asking might be your family or maybe one friend. And once you ask and they give, then it's really important, because even though, Pradeepa sends to all of our supporters, sends, a newsletter, quarterly updates, things like that. It's really important to remember that you have a relationship with these people. And so whether you're talking to them on the phone and you just relay something that's going on in Young Life, or like the time we're at now, like how people aren't calling me and asking me like, what is my investment going towards now that we're in COVID? But I'm taking the opportunity to tell them about the ways in which we are getting creative and ensuring that kids are being met and that needs are being met. And if you stay in relationship with these people, even if they're people that you only talk to 3 or 4 times a year, if you stay in relationship with them and thank them and show them how grateful you are and what their money is going towards, it gets easier to make the ask again next year. And if you build up a number of people over years, you start with a core of 2 or 3 or 4, and then you add a couple or 3 each year. By the time you're in your 3rd year, you've got 20 people you're supporting Young Life, and they know the ask is coming, and it's not uncomfortable. But you have to stay in relationship with them. If you ask them in September and you don't talk to them again until the following September, you're not being in relationship with them. So it's important to keep them involved in Young Life, even if it's just giving them some information along the way. So I would say that's really the way to do it. And then there's some things that Pradeepa can probably talk to about how he allocates time for top donors and things like that, if you want to touch on that, Pradeepa.
Yeah, I think with our top 10 donors, at least once a year, I'm reaching out to them and doing taking them out to lunch or coffee, at least. And so there's some different relationships with different donors who kind of they want a little bit more attention, especially some of our larger donors. And then you have people on the other end of the spectrum who are like, hey, don't give me gifts. I don't want you to spend any more money. Like I gave because I wanted to go to kids. And so you just have to feel out what those, how to care for those donors. And I think that all of this is, we can talk more about it, but I don't want to take up too much time here. But all of this is the whole concept of relationship-centered engagement, right? It's the business principle of what you do outside of a meeting, like increases the quality of what happens inside of a meeting, which is just a very modern businessy way of saying Jesus is with people, he cared for people, and it changed their lives, and so like that's the model that we're taking, is like, so when we talk about our virtual banquet, the reason our virtual banquet I think was so successful outside of the team that we had working on it behind the scenes was we did relationships really well. And a lot of the people that showed up to our virtual banquet, because it was such a tumultuous time in May, a lot of it was committee just, again, reaching out to their personal network and saying, hey, will you join? And then leaders and parents coming alongside because they saw the momentum building as well. So it's like, the relationship centered piece is what really adds to all of the fundraising efforts that we do. If we have these good relationships, man, it exponentially increases our chances of raising, fundraising as we need to. So with that, the last thing I'll talk about is our virtual banquet was a huge pivot for us. That we did some things really well, and then on the back end, as we also said, hey, there are things that we could do better for next year if we do this in a virtual setting, which it looks like we will. But I will say this: here are a couple of things. One, resource your weaknesses. So for us, we didn't really have anyone in our area or on staff or even one of our volunteers. And honestly, even if we had, we'd still probably resource this part, is finding somebody who does video production. Production, quality is like, I think that's what changed the game for us, is I didn't have to worry about editing through the night and stretching myself, because that's not a strong suit of mine. But we found a person, and really what it was is we found an amazing church. Venture Church in Encinitas is amazing, and they let us use their venue. in terms of their stage and all of their equipment, but also their visual and audio director happened to be on staff, and it was an amazing partnership with him because he had his own production company before coming on staff with the church. So the production value was just so great for us, and it took a huge piece off of our plates so that we could be creative and we could engage kids and get really good content and just resource that out. I would say the other piece would be some of the communication and the ways that we communicate with parents and potential donors, which if you have questions, I would love to either get you on a call with me or a couple of our committee people if you have. I've spoken to probably 8 or 9 folks about a virtual banquet or our virtual banquet and how they can translate it for their area. Everybody's area is different, but there are some things that we found were really good. And like I said, those things were like resourcing those weaknesses, finding a really good venue with good lighting and the equipment, which most of the time it happens to be a church and they're, in your own backyard. And if you haven't reached out to some of those churches, man, what a great time to reach into partnerships as my 7-year-old is whining. Sorry. He's on virtual distance learning. Yay. All right. So I think that's all I had. Matt, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just an interesting add-on is our virtual banquet, and Pradeepa is kind of downplaying his role, which was building content. And, it really was a little microcosm of Young Life. There was humor, there was message, there was uplifting, music, and it was fun. So, he did a great job at combining that with our production value. But I will say that the interesting part is because we've been going through this evolution of asking and getting very relational, expanding those relationships over time, we had people from all over the country, way outside our area, who tuned into this virtual banquet and gave. And it's a way for every committee to do the same thing, because we all have family members and friends that are far-flung who are willing to support you in something you love in Young Life in your area. And so you don't have to be just dependent on your little geographic area. You can actually ask God to bring resources to you from anywhere in the world. And so I would encourage you to think about that as you start the fundraising piece, but to remember that this is a relational thing and it can expand well beyond your territory.
Fantastic. Hey, well, thank you guys so much. If you have any other questions, we will get Matt and my contact information out to you guys as well, because we always want to be a resource for other areas. We're excited that we're in this together. You're not alone. This is the beauty of this day. The committee leader day is, hey, there's hundreds of other people that are in this with you. So keep going so that more kids will know in your communities. Thanks, guys.